Call the hearing to order. Get everybody in. We've got a vote at approximately 1:15, which we'll have to postpone, or at least we'll have to recess for a short period of time during the markup. But with that, we'll just kind of play it by ear. Today, what we're going to be doing, we're marking up several bills. The federal government routinely spends approximately $500 billion through prime contracts each and every year. Ensuring that small businesses can compete for these contracts offers several benefits. One, business growth. Another, job creation, greater competition, lower prices, and innovation. And over the past 4 years, I've made it a priority to enact some reforms to increase small businesses' ability to compete in the federal marketplace, and I'm proud of some of our legislative accomplishments. In 112 Congress, the committee reported out 11 contracting reform bills, many of which are now law. And I believe that those efforts, through those efforts, the legislation we passed last year and the bills that we're going to mark up today, it's going to improve the ability of small contractors to successfully compete. And we focused on a lot of what I'll call the 3 C's: clarity, competition, and consequences. In terms of clarity, our efforts ensure that small business contracting laws are understandable, comprehensive, and they promote transparency. And to that end, we've passed reforms addressing and improving the roles of small business advocates, the process for determining which firms are small, the way SBA reports on goals, the way the 13 mentor protege programs interact, the way small business team on contracts, and the rules around suspension and debarment. Further, together, we've helped small businesses compete. We've required that all acquisition plans address the use of small businesses. We've increased the role of small business advocates in the acquisition planning process, and we've expanded the number of contracts counted towards the small business goals, which means more opportunities for small businesses. And finally, we worked on consequences, which are holding businesses and agencies responsible. And to that end, we've made it easier to suspend and debar bad actors. We've also imposed penalties on firms acting as fronts for large businesses in an attempt to misuse the SBA's contracting programs. We've required agencies to create mitigation plans when they fail to meet their goals. We've held large businesses accountable for their subcontracting plans, and we've tied senior executive bonuses to small business goals. Today we're going to continue our work on clarity, competition, and consequences. And we'll be marking up 5 contracting bills introduced by the majority, plus a contracting bill and a bill addressing small business development centers, which is introduced by the ranking member. I believe that this is a very collaborative effort, and it is a testament to the importance of government contracting for small businesses, and it's a tribute, I think, to the bipartisan nature of the committee. And while we will briefly discuss each of the bills individually before we mark it up, I want to emphasize how important these issues are to both small businesses and to taxpayers. When small businesses compete for these contracts, something important happens, and that's jobs. Jobs are created. Innovation occurs, competition brings down prices, and in short, when small businesses win, I think that we all win. And I now recognize Ranking Member Velasquez for her opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This committee has worked well together on procurement issues, exposing fraud, waste, and abuse, and improving how SBA functions. It is my hope that today's discussion will further that tradition. For small businesses, federal agencies can be a great client. Last year, the federal government spent $461 billion purchasing goods and services. Everything from paper clips to airplanes to landscaping to construction are required throughout the public sector, and small companies are vital to meeting these needs. Congress and this committee in particular have long recognized the benefits that stem from small business participation in the federal marketplace. Helping small firms secure these opportunities, foster job growth, helps small businesses grow into larger ones, and creates greater overall economic prosperity. At the same time, when entrepreneurs are enlisted to meet government's procurement needs, American taxpayers' dollars are well spent. Small businesses provide excellent services and quality products at competitive prices. Moreover, bringing additional small companies into the procurement fold increases competition, raising the quality of services and products available to the government. Given the benefits of having government do business with small enterprises, it is important that federal agencies meet their contracting goals. Unfortunately, this hasn't happened. The 23% small business contracting goal has not been met in many years, although it appears that objective may finally be met this year. Similar initiatives aimed at helping women-owned businesses have fallen short. The Service Disabled Veteran-Owned Small Business Program has also not kept pace. The SBA is responsible for ensuring other agencies are proactively working to meet their small business contracting goals. Through hearings, oversight, and investigations, this committee has carefully examined why the SBA has repeatedly failed in this regard. Our efforts also help identify possible solutions. It is my hope that the committee can work together in crafting legislation that will make these programs function more effectively. We also must not ignore other elements of the SBA portfolio. At a time when our economy is still struggling with job creation, entrepreneurship is vital. As such, we must endeavor to ensure SBA's entrepreneurial development programs remain up to date, providing the tools that help Americans launch new businesses. I look forward to that discussion today as well. Mr. Chairman, our economy remains in a difficult spot. We all acknowledge that while progress has been made, we have a long way to go. Congress will be remiss to ignore the absolute vital role small businesses will play in restoring our nation's prosperity. Today's action should provide a starting point in addressing some of the policy obstacles that are impeding small business growth. I thank the chairman again, and I yield back.
Thank you. Do any other members wish to be recognized for the purpose of an opening statement? Seeing none, we'll move on. We're going to be marking up 7 bills today, and we're going to do it in the order that they were noticed. The first bill is H.R. 4093, the Greater Opportunities for Small Business Act 2014, which I did introduce with Mr. Hanna, Ms. Herrera-Butler, and Mr. Murphy. This bill does 3 things. What it does is raise the federal government small business prime contracting goal from 23% to 25%. It raises the subcontracting goal from 35.9 to 40% and ensures that only prime contracts are counted towards the prime contracting goal. Last year, the government spent $460 billion through prime contracts, and the preliminary data shows that for the first time in 7 years, the percentage awarded to small businesses exceeded 23%. And I believe this demonstrates that the tools we've given agencies to meet the small business goals and the focus we're placing on federal contracting, I think it is working. Given that federal spending fell by $40 billion during the same period, it also illustrates that doing more with small businesses is good for taxpayers. Thus, raising the goals will help small businesses compete. It's going to help taxpayers, and it's going to help the government operate more efficiently. Now, I urge support for the bill. I recognize Ranking Member Velasquez for her remarks on 4093.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I support this bill. It will be difficult to overstate the significance of the federal marketplace to the small business sector. As of now, it appears that in 2013, small firms were awarded $83.2 billion in federal contracts. While these numbers could see revision before SBA releases its annual scorecard, this preliminary data suggests that for the first time since 2005, the federal government may finally reach its goal of awarding 23% of contracts to small firms. While this constitutes progress, it is well past due, and it is certainly not enough. Let's remember, every single year, federal agencies miss their contracting goals, amounts to billions of dollars in lost revenue for entrepreneurs. In that regard, the issue raised by H.R. 4093, raising the federal government's statutory small business procurement goal, it is a timely one. The bill also increases the government's subcontracting goals, and it eliminates a loophole that has inhibited small business participation in the Department of Energy contracts. Given the real tangible benefit that stems from using small businesses for federal projects, it makes perfect sense to discuss raising this threshold. Small business deserve better. It is my hope that the committee and Congress will work to ensure agencies do more to incorporate entrepreneurs into the procurement efforts is a win-win for government, for taxpayers, is a win-win for the small business sector. I yield back.
Well said. Are there any other members that wish to be recognized for statement on H.R. 4093? Seeing none, the committee now moves to consideration of H.R. 4093. The clerk please report the title of the bill.
H.R. 4093 to amend the Small Business Act to raise the prime and subcontract goals and for other purposes.
Mr. Chair,
With that,
I have an amendment at the desk.
without objection, H.R. 4093 is considered read and open for amendment at any point. At this point, I think we'll just recess and we'll come back. We have two amendments on 4093, amendment number 1 from Ms. Chu and amendment number 2 from Ms. Clark. We'll pick those up just as soon as we get back. So we'll recess. I think we got 3 votes, so we'll recess temporarily. Thanks. And we are presently on Bill 4093, and first amendment up is Ms. Chu. For what purpose?
Yes, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk, please report the amendment.
Amendment number 1 to H.R. 4093 offered by Ms. Chu of California. Add at the end of the bill the following. Section 4.
Without objection, the bills, or the amendment, I mean, is considered as read. That's all right. No objections. The gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I strongly support the efforts of the committee in ensuring that small businesses receive a greater share of government contracts. Providing more opportunities for small businesses to compete for contracts will create jobs and strengthen our economy. We must ensure that government contracting money is spent in such a way that maximizes the potential economic growth. This is why I am introducing this amendment, which would increase the federal contracting goal for women-owned small businesses to 6%. And I am proud to have the support of my colleagues, Representatives Clark, Hahn, Meng, Barber, Custer, and Murphy. Women make up 50% of the workforce, but the current goal for women-owned businesses is only 5%. Also, women-owned businesses lag behind male-owned businesses. The average revenue of women-owned businesses is only 27% of the average revenue of male-owned businesses. By granting a larger share of government contracts to women-owned small businesses, we will encourage women in the workforce to start their own firms. As business owners, not only will they be able to earn more for themselves and their families, they will also create jobs and contribute more to the economy. Increasing this contracting goal to 6% will give women-owned small businesses the opportunity to access billions more in federal contracts. It is imperative that the government spends its contracting dollars where they can do the most good, and women-owned small businesses offer us great potential for growth. With that, I ask for the committee's support, and I yield back.
Does any other member wish to be heard on the amendment?
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last word.
Who said that? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Congresswoman Chu, for this amendment, which I'm pleased to be a co-sponsor. I strongly support this concept of increasing the contracting goal for women-owned small businesses from 5 to 6%, and I was a proud co-sponsor of this amendment with the Congresswoman. I know that we have to do more to help women-owned businesses in this country, and the federal government must lead by example when it comes to supporting women-owned businesses across the nation. This amendment is one small step that we can take to help women-owned businesses succeed, and I encourage my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Does any other member? Murphy?
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last word.
Sure.
Thank you. I support the distinguished lady from California, Ms. Chu's amendment to increase the federal contracting goal for women-owned small business. With March as Women's History Month, it is the perfect time to recognize the irreplaceable contributions women make to our economy. For example, women have improved the average education level of America's workforce, and women lead some of the most innovative companies in the nation. Women like Shirley Brossmeyer and Denise Castronova run vital businesses in my district. Ms. Brossmeyer is CEO of Florida Turbine Technologies, which develops cutting-edge jet engine innovations. And Ms. Casanova is owner and founder of Casanova Chocolates, which produces some of the best chocolate I've ever had. In addition to recognizing women's equal role in the workforce, we must acknowledge that women still are paid a fraction of what men earn for identical work. Representative Chu's amendment is one step in the right direction to level the playing field for women in business, and I trust my colleagues will support it unanimously. When women succeed, America succeeds. Thank you, Ms. Chair.
Any other member wish to be heard on the amendment? Ms. Hahn?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to strike the last word. And I want to thank my colleague, Congresswoman Chu from California. I'm proud to join her in offering this very important amendment. Government contracts offer small businesses of all kinds an opportunity to grow, to hire, and contribute to their local economy. But too often, certain groups of small business owners are left out of these benefits. The lack of federal contracts going to women-owned small businesses is well documented and unacceptable. But we're making progress, and I'm proud to offer this amendment with my colleagues that pushes us further. I'm happy to support the Greater Opportunities for Small Business Act, and I hope that we can make sure that while we increase contracting with small businesses, we ensure that women small business owners see more opportunities as well. Thank you, and I yield back.
Any other member wish to be heard on?
I move to strike the last word.
Meg?
I want to thank Congresswoman Chu for her leadership on this amendment. As we move to increase the small business contracting goal, it's important to secure additional opportunities for women and not leave contracting parity to chance. March is Women's History Month, and I can't think of a better way for the committee to do its part than by passing this amendment. A 1% increase can result in billions of dollars of federal contracts for women-owned businesses. Thank you. I yield back.
Any other member?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to strike the last word. I, too, would like to take a minute to thank Ms. Chu for authoring and my Democratic colleagues who, along with myself, joined Ms. Chu as co-sponsors of this amendment. Ever mindful that when women succeed, America succeeds, more and more women are swelling the ranks of our nation's entrepreneurs. As such, it is important that we as legislators adjust our expectations to better reflect the diverse assortment of entrepreneurs and assist them as they create the jobs that will sustain our economy. Again, I'd like to thank Mrs. Chu, and I urge my colleagues to support this common sense amendment, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Custer?
I move to strike the last word. I also thank Congresswoman Chu for her leadership on behalf of women entrepreneurs and small business owners across the country. I'm proud to partner with you on this common sense amendment. Just 2 weeks ago, I hosted the first in a series of roundtables with women business leaders in Salem, New Hampshire. We discussed obstacles facing women entrepreneurs, including limited access to capital, technical assistance, and federal contracting opportunities. We can all agree that when women succeed, our entire economy and our country succeeds. By helping to level the playing field for women-owned businesses, this amendment would foster greater competition in contracting marketplaces and result in greater savings and options for America's taxpayers. I urge all of our colleagues to support this common sense amendment, and I yield back.
Any other member wish to be heard on the amendment? Ranking Member Velasquez.
I rise to strike the last word, and I just want to thank Congresswoman Chu for this amendment. The reality is that women employ more than 13 million people, are generating $1.9 trillion in sales, and women businesses are here to stay, and they play an important role in our economy. And the women-owned business contracting goal is now 20 years old. With women's role in the small business sector growing, we must take steps to update the federal contracting policy so that it reflects the new realities. On that note, I urge support of this amendment. Thank you.
Any other member wish to be heard on the amendment? As Chairman of the Small Business Committee, I've always tried not to favor one particular group over another or picking winners and losers. And we actually have 4 subcategories in this. And I think that, if we're going to increase this, and there's going to be an extra $10 billion out there to compete for. I think that all small businesses ought to have that opportunity instead of trying to single out and get an advantage from one or the other. So I don't support the amendment. And with that, the question is on the amendment offered by Ms. Chu, which is amendment number 1 to 4093. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. It's the opinion of the chair.
Mr. Chair, I ask for a recorded vote.
A recorded vote has been called. Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Graves.
No.
Mr. Graves, no. Mr. Shabbat. Mr. Shabbat, no. Mr. King. Mr. King. Mr. Kaufman. Mr. Kaufman, no. Mr. Luke DeMeyer. Mr. Luke DeMeyer, no. Mr. Mulvaney. Mr. Mulvaney, no. Mr. Tipton. Mr. Tipton, no. Ms. Herrera Butler. Ms. Herrera Butler. Mr. Hanna. Mr. Hanna, no. Mr. Huelskamp. Mr. Huelskamp, no. Mr. Schweikert. Mr. Schweikert. Mr. Benevolio. Mr. Benevolio, no. Mr. Collins. Mr. Collins, no. Mr. Rice. Mr. Rice. Ms. Velasquez. Yes. Ms. Velasquez, aye. Ms. Clark. Mr. Schrader. Mr. Schrader. Mr. Schrader, aye. Ms. Clark. Ms. Clark, aye. Ms. Chu. Ms. Chu, aye. Ms. Hahn.
Aye.
Ms. Hahn, aye. Mr. Payne.
Aye.
Mr. Payne, aye. Ms. Meng.
Aye.
Ms. Meng, aye. Mr. Schrader. Mr. Schneider. Mr. Schneider. Mr. Barber. Mr. Barber, aye. Ms. Custer. Ms. Custer, aye. Mr. Murphy. Mr. Murphy, aye.
Any other members who wish to vote? Ms. Herrera Butler.
Ms. Herrera Butler votes aye.
Does any other member wish to be heard on the amendment? Seeing none. Ms. Herrera Butler. No. Ms. Herrera Butler requests from aye to nay.
Ms. Herrera Butler changes from aye to nay.
Are the other members who wish to be voted or recorded? Seeing none, please report the vote.
The noes are 11, the ayes.
How's Mr. Shabbat recorded?
As a no.
Any other members wish to be recorded?
Mr. Schweikert. Mr. Schweikert votes no.
All right.
The ayes are 10, the noes are 12.
On this vote, the ayes are 10, the noes are 12. The amendment is not agreed to. Next amendment, number 2, Bill 4093, Ms. Clark.
Mr. Chairman, do I have an amendment at the desk?
Clerk, please report the amendment.
H.R. number 2 to H.R. 4093, offered by Ms. Clark of New York. Add at the end of the bill the following.
Without
Section
objection,
4.
The amendment is considered read. Gentlelady, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My very straightforward amendment is simply a reflection of the socially and economically disadvantaged small businesses' participation. To ensure that our national recovery enjoys strong and robust growth, it is essential that all of our nation's small businesses are fully engaged and active participants. Given the steady growth and participation, it's essential that we recognize this growth and made adjustments to reflect this reality. I urge my colleagues to support this common sense amendment, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Any other member wish to be heard on the amendment?
Mr. Chairman,
Thank you, Member Velasquez.
I rise in support of this amendment. One area where the federal government has made some progress in its procurement goal is in regards to economically and socially disadvantaged individuals. This standard has historically been set at 5%. Yet, in recent years, the federal government has supplied as much as 8% of its outsourced projects to this class of business. Ethnic minorities and people of color benefit from this program, as do female entrepreneurs. The program is also important in encouraging entrepreneurs from lower income backgrounds to succeed. As federal agencies are already regularly exceeding the goals set for this program, it only makes sense that we would ask them to do more. As the face of American small business changes, so too should our federal policies that govern contracting for small businesses. I believe the gentlewoman's amendment is a good one that fits well with the overall intention of the broader bill. I therefore thank my friend from New York and yield back the balance of my time.
Does any other member wish to be heard on the amendment?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Shabbat.
move to strike the last word. Mr. Chairman, I'd be very brief. I would just like to reiterate the Chairman's comments that I think the purpose, those that are voting no aren't opposed to any of these particular groups having access, equal access to the contracts that are available, but we think it ought to be an equal opportunity, and we ought not to pick winners and losers. And that's why I think the folks on this side are voting no, not because we have any antipathy or opposition to various groups getting these contracts. And each one of these, Mr. Chairman, I'd ask Chair a question. Each one of these groups would have an equal opportunity to get access to these funds. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you very much. I yield back my time.
Mr. Tipton.
Mr. Chairman, move to strike the last word. Do have a question, actually, for the sponsor of the amendment. If you'd be so kind, what is the dollar amount that you're designating as economically disadvantaged? And where is that reflected in the amendment?
I'm sorry, what do you mean by dollar amount?
Well, your amendment states economically and socially disadvantaged. So
Right.
what's the dollar amount that's economically disadvantaged?
It's already set in statute, sir.
What is
So
that?
we're going based on the statute.
So we're already protecting the economically and socially disadvantaged in statute now. So thank you. I yield back.
Yes, it's already in statute.
Any other member wish to be heard on the amendment? As I stated before, I don't like singling out individual subgroups. I like the idea that all small businesses get to compete for this money. It doesn't prevent anyone from getting an opportunity under this, and so I am opposed to the amendment. And with that, the question is on the amendment offered by Ms. Clark.
Would the gentleman yield
Number
just
2.
a moment, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to disturb you, but I just wanted to point out that we're only talking 5% here. We're not talking the entire. So there's 95% for just about everybody, you know. But we're
5% of the total, and the fact of the matter is, if we increase that 2%, we actually back up on every other small business that's out there. We're worse off.
what do you mean we back up?
Well, every other small business is worse off in terms of.
How are they worse off, Mr. Chairman, if they're already in contracts? How are they worse off?
Because you take away everything that we're trying to do.
I'm not clear on what you mean, but I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
The question is on the amendment offered by Ms. Clark, amendment number 2 to 4093. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. No. The opinion of the chair is the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to.
Can we get a recorded vote, Mr. Chairman?
A recorded vote has been requested. Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Graves?
No.
Mr. Graves, no. Mr. Shabbat? No. Mr. Shabbat, no. Mr. King? Mr. King? Mr. Kaufman? No. Mr. Kaufman, no. Mr. Lukemeyer? No. Mr. Lukemeyer, no. Mr. Mulvaney? No. Mr. Mulvaney, no. Mr. Tipton? No. Mr. Tipton, no. Ms. Herrera-Butler? Ms. Herrera-Butler, no. Mr. Hanna? No. Mr. Hanna, no. Mr. Huelskamp? Mr. Huelskamp? Mr. Schweikert? No. Mr. Schweikert, no. Mr. Bentivolio? No. Mr. Bentivolio, no. Mr. Collins? No. Mr. Collins, no. Mr. Rice? No. Mr. Rice, no. Ms. Velazquez? Aye. Ms. Velazquez, aye. Mr. Schrader? Aye. Mr. Schrader, aye. Ms. Clark? Aye. Ms. Clark, aye. Ms. Chu? Aye. Ms. Chu, aye. Ms. Hahn? Aye. Ms. Hahn, aye. Mr. Payne?
Aye.
Mr. Payne, aye. Ms. Meng?
Aye.
Ms. Meng, aye. Mr. Schneider? Mr. Schneider? Mr. Barber? Aye. Mr. Barber, aye. Ms. Custer? Aye. Ms. Custer, aye. Mr. Murphy? Aye. Mr. Murphy, aye.
Are there any other members that wish to vote? Seeing none, please report the vote.
The ayes are 10 and the nays are 12.
On this vote, the ayes are 10, the nays are 12. The amendment is not agreed to. Are there any other amendments? Seeing none, the question is on agreeing to H.R. 4093. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. H.R. 4093 is agreed to. Without objection, a quorum being present, the bill is favorably reported to the House. And without objection, the committee staff is authorized to correct punctuation and any other necessary technical corrections, performing changes. With that, we will move on to H.R. 4094, the Contracting Data and Bundling Accountability Act of 2014, which I introduced with Mr. Hanna, Ms. Chu, Ms. Meng, and Mr. Murphy. Contract bundling is a top complaint that I receive from small business contractors all over the country. An unjustified bundling and consolidation precludes small businesses from competing, along with all the other benefits that accrue from their participation. In a recent hearing, the Subcommittee on Contracting and Workforce and a recent GAO report found that contracts are not being properly identified as bundled or consolidated. Without this preliminary identification, agencies are not required to justify the decision to consolidate or bundle, nor are they required to mitigate the effects of their consolidation or bundling. And in short, this is as if the laws were passed to limit contracting bundling simply don't apply. This bill attempts to address the problem by requiring the SBA, or the Office of Federal Procurement Policy, and other agencies to work together on a plan to improve the quality of the data. And it further requires that after the plan is in place for a year, then GAO will audit the process and look for further areas of improvement. This is not simply a bureaucratic exercise. Some agencies have gone 17 years without reporting a single contract as bundled, when it's clear that they are bundling. Multi-billion-dollar procurements have been awarded in the last week that are clearly consolidated, but were not treated as such. And this is going to provide a measure of accountability that's been sorely lacking, and I'd urge support of the bill, and I yield to Ranking Member Velazquez for her
Thank
report.
you, Mr. Chairman. One of the most daunting challenges facing small firms seeking federal work is the issue of contract bundling. Last year, $50 billion worth of federal contracts, nearly 10% of the entire federal marketplace, was awarded through bundle or consolidated projects. Indeed, as a result of contract bundling, small businesses miss out on opportunities worth more than $50 billion. I remember when President Bush came into office, he issued a report and identified some of the contract bundles, and yet nothing happened. Still today, nothing really has been happening. And this is why this bill is important. It is critical that we have a full grasp of the extent and prevalence of this problem. In that regard, H.R. 4094, the Contracting Data and Bundling Accountability Act, will aggregate data on bundled and consolidated contracts, giving a clearer picture of how this problem shapes the procurement process. It is also important that officials in charge of addressing this practice explain what concrete steps they're taking to prevent unfair bundling. In this committee, we often hear how the deck is stacked against small firms seeking federal work. Bundling is one of the most troublesome hurdles, shutting off large segments of federal work from entrepreneurs with the skill and experience to meet government needs. And it is important for small businesses. It is important for taxpayers. We should promote competition, and one way to one way to do that is by providing a level playing field for small businesses to participate in the federal procurement marketplace. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Are there any other members that wish to be recognized for a statement on 4094? Seeing none, the committee now moves to consideration of H.R. 4094. Clerk, please report the title of the bill.
H.R. 4094, to direct the Administrator of the Small Business Administration to develop and implement a plan to improve the quality of data reported on bundled and consolidated contracts and for other purposes.
Without objection, H.R. 4094 is considered read and open for amendment at any point. Does anyone have an amendment?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
What reason you rise? Okay. You did. Clerk, please report the amendment.
Amendment number 1 to H.R. 4094, offered by Ms. Chu of California, page 3.
Without objection, the amendment by Ms. Chu is considered as read. Seeing none, the gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chair, last year, the Small Business Subcommittee on Contracting and Workforce had an insightful hearing on the negative impact that unjustified contract bundling and consolidation has on small businesses. We learned that when federal projects are consolidated or bundled into larger contracts, fewer opportunities remain for small businesses. The extent to which, however, small businesses are negatively impacted is impossible to determine because the federal government has not met its requirement to self-report contract mergers over the past decade. Since that hearing last October, my staff has collaborated with Chairman Graves' staff on this important issue and the development of this legislation, which requires the SBA, in conjunction with other agencies, to develop and implement a plan to improve data reporting and mitigate unjustified contract bundling and consolidation in the federal government. This will bring more accountability to federal contracting and increase opportunities for small businesses, and as such, I support it. My amendment is very simple. It requires the Small Business Administration to brief the House and Senate Small Business Committees on the plan 90 days before they begin implementing it. This will give us an opportunity to give the SBA input on the plan before implementation begins. I ask for the committee's support, and I yield back.
Any other members wish to be heard on the amendment? Seeing none, I support the amendment. I think it gives the committee, our committee, some more oversight over contract bundling. And I think anytime that happens, it's a good thing. So with that, the question is on the amendment offered by Ms. Chu, amendment number 1 to 4094. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Opinion of the chairs, the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. The amendment is agreed to. Does anyone else have an amendment? Seeing none, the question is on agreeing to H.R. 4094 as amended. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Opinion of the chairs, the ayes have it. H.R. 4094 is agreed to, and without objection, and a quorum being present, the bill is favorably reported to the House. And without objection, the committee staff is authorized to correct punctuation and make other necessary technical corrections and conforming changes. With that, we'll move on to H.R. 2751, the Common Sense Construction Contracting Act of 2013, introduced by Mr. Hanna, Mr. Megg, and myself. And I now yield to Mr. Hanna.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Ranking Member Meng, for your support. This bill seeks to repair a problem that has been around quite a while. In a normal auction, there are multiple buyers. In a reverse auction, there are multiple sellers. So what happens is it works well.
The gentleman yield, just so we have
I'm
clarification. This is H.R. 2751.
That's correct, 2751. Thank you.
I think I misread it earlier, so I just want to make that clarification.
In a normal auction, there are multiple buyers bidding for a single item or project. In a reverse auction, there are multiple sellers. But what we have discovered is that it works very well with non-subjective items like pencils, pens, office supplies, a whole host of things that are commonplace and indefinable. Where it works very badly, and the Army Corps of Engineers conducted 2 studies showing the government does not save money when it uses reverse auctions, because a lot of the things that are purchased are subjective. For example, design work, architectural work, construction work where it's much more complicated. Reverse auctions have actually, in many cases, reversed competition and caused a race to the bottom because people literally keep bidding and bidding and bidding. And in many cases, they wind up with a project that they wish they had not received. So what this does is it keeps a reverse auctioning alive where it works, and it seeks to correct it and change it where it hasn't shown to work in those areas like designing architectural work and construction.
I now recognize Ranking Member Velasquez for any remarks you might have on 2751.
I am in total agreement and support the gentleman's legislation, H.R. 2751.
Any other members wish to be heard on H.R. 2751?
I do. Concerns across the construction industry from subcontractors and prime contractors have been raised about the effectiveness of reverse auctions. It's become apparent that reverse auctions for construction projects are not a wise use of taxpayer dollars. While money can be saved in the short term, the quality of projects and the contractors are often questionable. The bidders on many of these projects engage in a race to the bottom in an attempt to save their failing businesses. I look forward to continue to examine these race to the bottom problems in other areas of federal procurement. I was happy to be an original supporter of this legislation, and I want to thank Mr. Hanna and Mr. Graves for sponsoring this important legislation, which rids taxpayers of this wasteful procurement method. Thank you, and I yield back.
Any other member wish to be heard? Seeing none, the committee now moves to consideration of H.R. 2751. Clerk, please report the title of the bill.
H.R. 2751, to amend the Small Business Act to prohibit the use of reverse auctions for design and construction services procurements.
Without objection, H.R. 2751 is considered read and open for amendment at any point. Does anyone have an amendment to offer? Where are we at? Yeah, seeing none. Question is on H.R. 2751. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. It's the opinion of the chairs that the ayes have it, and H.R. 2751 is agreed to, and without objection, a quorum being present, the bill is favorably reported to the House. Without further objection, the committee staff is authorized to correct punctuation and make other necessary technical corrections and conforming changes. Without, our next bill for consideration is H.R. 2882, the Improving Opportunities for Service-Disabled Veteran-Owned Small Businesses Act of 2014, which was introduced by Mr. Coffin, Mr. Flores, Mr. Miller, Mr. Rowe, Mr. Hanna, Mr. Connolly, Ms. Herrera-Butler, and myself. And I now yield to Mr. Kaufman to speak on H.R. 2882.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank the Chairman and Ranking members for bringing H.R. 2882, the Improving Opportunities for Service-Disabled Veteran-Owned Small Business Act, up for discussion in today's markup. I'm proud to have introduced this proposal with both Chairman Graves and Chairman Miller of the House Veterans Affairs Committee. As many of you know, the Small Business Administration and the Department of Veterans Affairs operate procurement programs for service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses. However, in my role as member of both the House Small Business Committee and the House Veterans Committee, I've heard from a lot of veterans about problems with the current process, most notably regarding inconsistency between the SBA and VA. The SBA hears challenges for service-disabled veteran-owned small business status decisions for all agencies other than VA. In contrast, VA verifies all potential service-disabled veteran-owned small business companies applying for special procurement preferences for VA contracts. The differences in the definition. Processes and interpretation between the VA and SBA cause inconsistent decisions regarding which firms qualify for contracts. Under the current system, a service-disabled veteran-owned small business can qualify at one agency and not another for procurement purposes. This inconsistency often adds cost, confusion, and opens the door to fraud. Moreover, the current process requires the VA to make decisions that are outside their expertise, such as determining business structures. In fact, VA told us that over 98% of the firms they reject are rejected not because the individual isn't a veteran or service-disabled veteran, but because of the business structure. This has caused numerous conflicts because the SBA has identified numerous cases they would have decided differently than the VA. The process is cumbersome, expensive, and does not work for our veterans. Therefore, H.R. 2882 will transfer the VA verification process for firms to the SBA, unify the definitions of service-disabled veteran-owned small business and veteran-owned small business, and add transparency. Additionally, the legislation will increase predictability by creating an appellate process by which a service-disabled veteran-owned small business can challenge an agency decision. I want to be clear that the legislation doesn't change the vet's first preference at VA. Rather, it works to make sure that only qualified firms are able to benefit from the vet's first preference by adding transparency and clarity to the process. I want to thank the Chairman for bringing this issue up, and I yield back.
Are there any other members that wish to be recognized for a statement on H.R. 2882? Seeing none, the committee now moves to consideration of H.R. 2882. Clerk, please report the title of the bill.
H.R. 2882 to amend the Small Business Act and Title 38 United States Code to provide for a consolidated definition of a small business concern owned and controlled by veterans and for other purposes.
Without objection, H.R. 2882 would be considered read and open for amendment at any point. And I do have an amendment in the nature of a substitute. Clerk, please read the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 2882 offered.
The amendment can be considered as read. Without objection, the amendment in the nature of a substitute should be considered as the base text for the purpose of amendment. I do support 2882 as I outlined before because it does help legitimate service-disabled veterans and veterans compete for federal contracts, and it's going to allow the government to operate more efficiency. The bill reflects a concerted effort between this committee and the Committee on Veterans Affairs to craft a balanced solution. The Veterans Affairs Committee has agreed to waive their jurisdiction on this bill, and I'm offering this amendment in the nature of a substitute based upon some changes that were negotiated with the ranking member and myself. Furthermore, this committee does not have jurisdiction over Title 38 of the United States Code, so changes to definitions in Title 38 have been removed from the bill in the amendment. The Department of Veterans Affairs should focus on deciding which individuals are veterans and service-disabled veterans, then providing them with the benefits that they've earned. The SBA, on the other hand, should determine whether firms owned by veterans and service-disabled veterans are small for the purposes of the federal contracting program. That's what H.R. 2882 does, is it realigns the functions of each agency so that they can each focus on what they do best rather than perpetuating a broken system. I personally feel our veterans deserve a little bit better, and H.R. 2882 is a good step. I now recognize Ranking Member Velasquez for her remarks on the amendment in the nature of a substitute to 2882.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Time and again, this committee has seen how skills learned in the military are vital to a career in entrepreneurship, whether it is familiarity with the government procurement process, leadership abilities, tireless discipline, or a willingness to take risks. We have seen countless examples of veterans entering civilian life to become small business owners and create jobs in their community. Today, there are 22 million veterans who sacrificed for our nation, 5.5 million of whom were disabled from service-connected injuries. These brave individuals deserve our ongoing gratitude and our profound respect. Efforts to channel contacts to service-disabled veterans-owned small businesses is one way that we can show our commitment to them. Regrettably, Lax verification of firms receiving these very contracts is undermining these efforts. GAO has done significant work finding that ineligible firms have won contracts that should instead have gone to service disabled veterans. These abuse include front companies posing as veterans, pass-throughs where the bulk of the work and revenue went to a non-veteran entities, and in some cases, outright fraud. As a result, veterans lost out millions of dollars of government projects. The bill before us today, H.R. 2882, takes steps to improve this process. It moves the Vets First verification initiative from the VA to the SBA. Ideally, doing so should take advantage of SBA's experience in certifying firms in other contracting programs. The result should be fewer non-eligible entities receiving contracts intended for America's veterans. Unfortunately, H.R. 2882 uses an odd funding mechanism to reimburse the SBA. Instead of just authorizing funds as it is customary through Congress and the government, it relies on a complicated system of intergovernmental transfers. A similar system was put in place to fund small disadvantaged business certifications, but it did not work, resulting in an end to the program. Putting in place a discredited idea to support our nation's veterans makes no sense. In fact, it is a slap in the face to America's war fighters, treating them like second-class citizens, relying on external intergovernmental transfers as the underlying bill does, puts the entire program at risk. If there is not enough funding, or if there is a disagreement between the FBA and SBA, the program could shut down. That means no service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses will be certified. It means that existing firms will not be examined. This is precisely when fraud and abuse takes hold, when no one is watching. Why are we taking these risks, especially when it comes to protecting veterans-owned contractors? While I support the bill, I will be offering an amendment to improve upon this flawed funding structure and ensure that veterans receive the full support they need. For this reason, my amendment is supported by the American Legion. Regardless, we must make every effort to ensure that impostors cannot defraud the government and deprive legitimate service-disabled veterans entrepreneurs their fair share of federal contracts. Addressing this failing is long overdue. I look forward to working with the chairman and my colleagues on this shared goal and yield back the balance of my time.
Does anyone have an amendment to the amendment in the form
Mr.
of
Chairman,
substitute?
point of inquiry, please.
Mr. Schrader.
Just on the substitute, just so I understand what the substitute does, notice that it eliminates the original Section 2 of the bill and wondered why that was, where that defined the bill, what a qualifying veterans disabled enterprise was, and just wanted to understand why that was eliminated.
It's actually a technical. Counsel, do you want to explain what exactly?
The reason that that the amendment in the nature of a substitute removed the section was because of the issues between the definitions at the Department of Veterans Affairs and the SBA, and we were trying to draw a bright line to ensure that the SBA would be simply ruling on what constitutes a small business.
Okay, I understand. I just hope that that's a good definition that they have, because that has been a problem that we've observed in our committee, and want to make sure that a legitimate small business, veterans-owned, is the ones we're funding here. Second question, if I may, Mr. Chairman. Just, again, for my edification, talking a little bit about the funding mechanisms. There's a 6-year timeline that's in there, and what's the rationale behind the 6 years?
It is a 6-year timeline. It does allow for continued funding beyond that point, but it is a 6-year. And what we're doing is moving the funds out of it's a Veterans Affairs slush fund is what it is, and that's what we're trying to do under the bill. And that allows us to at least have input on directing how that money is going to be spent. The SBA is going to be making the determination. Right now, there is no oversight over that slush fund money. It's not appropriated. It's their money to do as they please, at least from the Veterans Administration. We would rather the SBA were making the determination on whether or not those businesses qualify or not.
I certainly agree with the base bill and Mr. Kaufman and yours endeavor here. I just wanted to, it also says any cost. So is this like whatever this program costs under the SBA, they will reimburse us, and there's enough in the fees that they collect to make sure that the Small Business Administrator is completely reimbursed for the cost of the program?
We think so. The problem with it is, though, if we appropriate money, then we're going to have to find an offset, and that'll kill the bill right up. And everything will stay just exactly the way it is, and the VA will continue to use our slush fund.
One last question, Mr. Chairman, because I'm trying to understand, and maybe it has to do with that offset. It seems like if we're saving $15 million, that we don't need an offset, right? I mean, it's money that's already been appropriated. SBA is going to do a better job.
If it has to be appropriated, we have to find an offset. So, I mean, that's the way the rules are right now, and like it or not, it'll kill the bill. So, which, you know, if that's what your intent is, then that's your prerogative. But
I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Does anyone have an amendment to the amendment in the form of a substitute? Ms. Custer.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk and offer that amendment at this time.
Clerk, please report the amendment.
Amendment number 1 to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 2882, offered by Ms. Custer of New Hampshire. Page 4, line 1.
Without the objection, the amendment is considered as read. Gentlelady, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In addition to this panel, I'm very fortunate to also be a member of the Veterans Affairs Committee, and there is no greater honor for me than serving the brave men and women who have served our country. While I am not a veteran, both my father and my husband's father served in World War II. In fact, my father-in-law was landing on the beaches of Normandy while my father flew cover overhead. My father flew a P-47 fighter plane and was shot down over the Battle of the Bulge on Christmas Eve of 1944. He spent the last 6 months of the war in a German prisoner of war camp. And when he returned home safely, he helped to start a new business, Wildcat Mountain Ski Area in Pinkham Notch, New Hampshire. It is my goal with this amendment to help ensure that all veterans have the resources and support they deserve if they decide to follow in my father's footsteps and start their own businesses. As amended, the underlying bill requires the Veterans Affairs Secretary and the Small Business Administration Administrator to meet twice a year to discuss how to increase opportunities for veteran-owned businesses. My amendment would expand this provision to also require the Secretary and Administrator to consult with veteran service organizations on how to achieve that goal. Republican and Democrat alike, we can all agree that the best ideas don't come from Washington, D.C. They come from individuals and communities in New Hampshire, Colorado, Missouri, New York, and across our country. My amendment would help ensure that the voices of veterans are heard as our government discusses how best to support veteran-owned small businesses and service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses. The American Legion and AMVETS have expressed support for this simple one-page amendment. I commend Congressman Kaufman, Congressman Hanna, the Chairman, and the Ranking Member for advancing the underlying bill, and I urge the adoption of my amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Does any other member wish to be heard on the amendment to the amendment in the form of a substitute? Seeing none, I support the amendment. I think it makes sense. So the question is on the amendment offered by Ms. Custer. All those in favor say A. Aye. All those opposed, no. Seeing none in the opinion of the chairs, the ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. With that, Ms. Hahn, do you have an amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment at the desk and offer that amendment at this time.
Please report the amendment.
Amendment number 2 to the amendment in the nature of a substitute, H.R. 2882, offered by Ms. Hahn of California. Page 4, line 14.
Considered as read.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First off, I'd also like to thank Mr. Kaufman for sponsoring this legislation. As another war comes to an end and we welcome our brave men and women back home, we must ensure that we afford them every resource at our disposal to ensure that they can live life the way they want to when they return from serving our country. For many veterans, this may mean starting and running their own small businesses, supporting themselves with their innovative and hardworking spirit, and contributing to their local economies. In this legislation, as amended, I was happy to see in the Memorandum of Understanding that the Secretary of Veterans Affairs and the Small Business Administrator will begin a discussion on ways to improve collaboration between the two agencies in order to increase opportunities for veteran and service-disabled veteran small business owners. This partnership is promising. And should this legislation pass, I'm looking forward to this discussion being the foundation for new progress to better serve the men and women who have served us all so well. But if we're going to have this discussion, I think it's important that we include two groups of veterans who have had less access and less opportunity as small business owners: female veterans and minority veterans. Today, women and minorities are serving their country more than ever before. And in the coming decades, we're going to see them make up a greater and greater percentage of our veterans. Yet women make up just 4% of veteran small business owners, despite making up almost 8% of the veteran population. And minorities make up more than 20% of the veteran population, but just 14% of veteran small business owners. They make up just 7% of veteran owners of small business with employees. There is clearly significant room for improvement. And the resources we have available in both the VA and the Small Business Administration can go a long way in closing these gaps. My amendment is simple. It ensures that in the Secretary and Administrator's upcoming discussion, they are sure to include ways to increase opportunities for women and minority veteran small business owners. I hope that the committee will ensure that the SBA and the VA will report back to us on their progress regarding these issues. I'm happy to support this legislation, and I hope we can work together to develop a productive collaboration with the VA so that we can best serve all the groups of the veterans. Thank you. I yield back.
Does any other member wish to be heard on the amendment? Mr. Kaufman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Having served 21 years in the military and as a combat veteran, I can tell you that for our disabled veterans, the enemy does not discriminate on who they fire upon. And for us to break them up into categories based on race and gender is the wrong direction for this country. Our military has made tremendous progress on the issues of race and gender, although we're certainly concerned about the sexual assault issue now before the Congress, but it absolutely makes no sense to identify them beyond that of being veterans or disabled veterans. So I certainly strongly oppose the amendment.
Do any other members wish to be heard on the amendment? Mr. Luke Meyer.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, maybe I'm out of order here with regards to point of order, but can you explain how we can have two amendments amending the same section at the same point? We've already got a substitute. That'd be the third degree, if I'm not mistaken. Besides that, we're amending the same place according to the language of this amendment. I don't have a problem with the amendment. I'm just procedure here, because both of them state on page 4, line 14, insert after this section. And
first one amended line 4. Second one amends line 14, doesn't it? Council, is it drafted correctly? Yes, the old version. It was changed after.
Okay.
Yes. Ms. Hahn's amendment amends page 4, line 14, not line 4.
Okay.
Just he has the old version of the amendment.
Okay. My mistake. Withdraw my.
Does anyone else wish to be heard on the amendment? Yeah, Soraya Butler.
I just have a quick question, Mr. Chairman, and for the sponsor.
Sure.
This is not setting a specific number goal, or it just, am I reading this correctly? In the meeting, they're to discuss ways to improve collaboration under the memorandum. to increase opportunities?
Yes.
So we're not setting
yeah.
a floor or a ceiling?
No, we're not. And we're certainly not really breaking them into any categories that is unreasonable. I'm just saying in their conversation, just let's make sure that when we discuss about outreach and opportunities, we definitely are finding ways to help women veterans as well.
Okay. Thank you. With that, I yield back.
Does anyone else wish to be heard on the amendment? I do support the amendment. I think that
Hallelujah.
anytime we can improve that collaboration, I think it's important. So with that,
Hallelujah.
Mr. Kaufman.
Thank you, Sam.
We were talking about a floor or ceiling, so I stand corrected.
Noted. The question is on the amendment offered by Ms. Hahn to the amendment in the nature of a substitute. All those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed say no. In the opinion of the chairs, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. With that, Ms. Velazquez, and we possibly have a vote in 5 minutes.
Okay.
Which
well,
doesn't make any difference. We'll come back.
Sure. Well, Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk, please report the amendment.
Amendment number 3 to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 2882, offered by Ms. Velazquez of New York.
yes.
Page 4.
Without objection, the amendment be considered read.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ensuring that our nation's veterans are able to build a career after their military service is a priority. After all, with 2.6 million veterans from the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq alone, these men and women have the skill and leadership qualities necessary to help our economy continue to grow. The bill before us takes a step in the right direction. It will help ensure that only service-disabled, veteran-owned small businesses qualify for contracts intended for them at the VA. However, the legislation relies on an unstable funding structure to support this important verification program. As worded in the bill, these intergovernmental transfers are not more than vague promises that the VA will reimburse the SBA for its costs. What happens if the VA doesn't collect enough fees from its contractors as the underlying bill requires? What happens if the SBA cost of operating this entity is greater than the amount of fees that the VA collects or wants to transfer to the SBA? These are important questions, and while OMB is directed to get involved, the true answers are we don't know and we hope everything works out. This uncertainty only serves to create openings for non-veterans to defraud the government and take contracts away from actual service-disabled veterans. This is just not good for our veterans. Simply put, they deserve more than these loose promises. They have fought for our nation's freedom, defended our democracy, and helped those in need throughout the world. We owe it to them to make sure that they have a dedicated funding stream that guarantees that contracts intended for them actually go to them. My amendment, which is supported by the American Legion, and Mr. Chairman, at a given time, I would like to ask unanimous consent for this letter from the American Legion in support of my amendment to be entered into the record. My amendment, which is supported by the American Legion, provides such assurances and by doing so ensures that funds are authorized for the program each year. In their letter, the American Legion states that the American Legion believes that this program needs to be properly and permanently funded if it's not to move at all. As the representative of 2.4 million veterans in 14,000 posts, those are strong words from the American Legion. With this in mind, I asked unanimous consent, and I did, that the letter is entered to the record. This is necessary because, as well as we all know, the eligibility verification process requires resources. Certification relies on application screening, examinations, regular oversight, and site visits. To put it more straightforward, if we're going to channel contracts to veterans, we have to make sure that it is really veterans that are actually getting them. It is also important to realize that we have been down this path before. and seen the problems that intergovernmental transfers cause when relied upon for program funding. The Small Disadvantaged Business Program relied on such a scheme 10 years ago, but due to problems with this structure, the program was unable to sustain itself. If the funding structure in the bill is maintained, it will not be a surprise to see the Vet First program cease operation in a few years altogether. What my amendment does is not different than what is already provided for the HUBZone and the AA minority-owned firms. We talk about the importance of a level playing field, but what the underlying bill does is penalize veterans by giving them an unreliable program. Because of these reasons, I urge you to vote yes on my amendment and fully fund this important initiative for our country's veterans. We owe this to our veterans, and it is time that we do right on their behalf. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Mr. Chairman?
Who called?
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last word.
Go ahead.
As the son of a veteran of World War II, of Korea and Vietnam, and as a member who represents over 85,000 veterans, I'm going to rise in support to this amendment. The funding structure of the bill in its current form is too unstable, and as it hinges on two agencies, which we have asked to work together in the past with little success. They have to come to an agreement on paying for this program, and what they've done in the past does not hold great promise for the future. We need to ensure that veterans-owned businesses do not become a bargaining chip if the VA and the SBA cannot reach an agreement. And the only way to do this is to provide a straightforward appropriation for the program. Rather than hoping that these agencies will somehow magically reach an agreement, we need to ensure from the outset that this vital program has the right funding. Small businesses invest time and money to enter into the federal marketplace, so we need to provide them with a certainty that the program will be operational so that they can and will make an investment. This committee has appropriated the other contracting programs such as HUBZone and 8A programs, and we should not treat our veterans who have served our country valiantly, we should not treat them any differently. The bill in its current form fails to address what would occur in the likelihood that the agencies fail to reach an agreement for the initial funding or in the event of an extension of the program. The vast majority of veterans businesses who are denied certification through the current system have been denied because of their business structure, not their status as veterans or service-disabled veterans. Providing straightforward funding for this bill allows OHA, the expert in determining whether or not a business is small, the ability to hear appeals immediately. I urge unanimous consent for Congresswoman Velasquez's amendment, and I yield back.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Kaufman.
I move to strike the last word.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, the bill as currently written respects not only the veterans of this country, I being one of them, but also respects the taxpayers of this country, in that it merely continues an existing funding source that this particular function has already been operating under.
Anyone else?
Mr. Kerr.
Mr. Schrader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Big supporter of our veterans community, big supporter of the underlying intent of this bill. I think it will go a long way, hopefully, to improving what our veterans deserve as far as small business opportunities. And to that end, I mean, for the sake of efficiency, it just seems odd to me that we have to go through a kind of a Byzantine, arcane funding mechanism, which, in my opinion, slightly tarnishes the great work that the committee has done, the chairman and ranking member. I mean, I don't understand why you need an offset for something that saves you, half the cost of the program. That goes against common sense at the end of the day. There's no constitutional, statutory, administrative rule that requires us to do that. And it seems, for the sake of the veterans community, it's been stated here by members of the committee, we want to make sure the money gets to the veterans so that this program is done right, so there's no fraud in the program, that these men and women that have served our country like Mr. Kaufman, who I really appreciate, can actually get the opportunities that they richly deserve. The offset thing has been violated, if you will, in a number of other areas. Members of this committee, both Republican and Democrat, have voted for the Skills Act, the Hazard Preparedness Reauthorization Act of 2013, the VA Major Medical Facility Bill, the Poison Control Center. All those things are the same. I mean, I'd like just to have a clean deal here where, hey, we're cutting the program's cost in half. That's a huge win for the taxpayer, I think, to your point, Mr. Kaufman's point. And let's just appropriate the $15 million, make sure the money gets there, call it good.
Would the Chairman?
I will yield back, actually.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I just would like to add, look, I have a list of the members, Republicans members in this committee, right here. And you have voted on legislation that contain non-offset authorizations for new programs. This amendment does not violate the cut GOT. It containing House Rule 21, Clause 10, and it applies only to mandatory spending. This is discretionary spending. It's not mandatory.
Go ahead.
I don't know who I'm asking. I'm asking you, Mr. Chairman, first, just a moment.
Sure.
So does this bill, I realize what I heard cited a couple times was last year's bills when we weren't operating under an agreed-to bipartisan bicameral budget. Are the bipartisan bicameral budget that we enacted for appropriations levels for this year, would this amendment violate that enacted budget? Last year we didn't, I mean, the House passed a budget, but there was nothing agreed to that we were operating under. Would this violate that budget? I'm going to guess that question's to the sponsor.
This is an authorizing committee. This is not an appropriation committee. What we are doing is authorizing a program. And in fact, we asked the parliamentarian yesterday, and he said, you are correct that they are not, with regards to the leadership protocols, you are correct that they are not enforceable with a point of order. Additionally, Budget Act points of order are not enforceable in committee.
No, I'm not trying to get all parliamentary, Anya. I just want to know, are we violating the spirit of the budget that we passed? That's all I want to know.
That we don't,
okay.
And that this amendment doesn't.
Here's the reality, and I think everybody in the room obviously supports veterans and want to make sure that, as to Mr. Barber's point, anyone that's been denied it's been based on business models or business practices. That's the reason we're trying to bring the SBA into this. That's the purpose of this, and we want to use the slush fund. We think they can do it for $10 million. There's $100 million in this. It's unappropriated dollars. We can't touch it. And we have, the fact of the matter is, the reality is, we have to have an offset. If we take this to the floor with a $15 million fiscal note, we have to have an offset. Or it's not coming to the floor.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, what would happen if BA doesn't collect the fees from the contractor?
The fact of the matter is, no money transfers until there is an agreement, until they come to a conclusion. So if there is none, then nothing changes. Nothing has changed. But what we are trying to do, at least at this point, is attempt to fix this for those veterans-owned businesses and allow them to be able to move forward. So the bottom line is, if there is no agreement, then no money transfers, and it stays exactly the way it is. If it works, and I think it will work, and the fact of the matter is, the last time it didn't work is because Congress didn't reauthorize it. That's the reason it didn't work.
It didn't work because we didn't have the oversight mechanism in place. It didn't work because we didn't provide a funding stream like we do for other programs. They deserve better. Veterans in this country deserve better.
I agree, and that's the reason we're trying to fix it. OMB will have oversight over this, and the fact is, if we have to go with an offset, there will not be a bill, so nothing will change. So at least we're trying to fix it. So with that, does anyone else wish to be heard on the amendment in the form of a substitute? Seeing none, the question is on the amendment offered by Ms. Velazquez to the amendment in the form of a substitute. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. No. In the opinion of the chairs, the noes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I ask for a recorded vote.
A recorded vote has been requested. Can we recess in the middle of that process, Council? Because I don't think we have time. We can do it. That's going to delay us. So everybody needs to come. That's going to make everybody come back. So with that, we will go ahead and recess. We'll get the vote out of the way, and then we'll come back and we will finish with the recorded vote, which we are in the process of having. So we're recessed. And we've had a recorded vote called. Clerk, please read the roll.
Mr. Graves?
No.
Mr. Graves, no. Mr. Shabbat? No. Mr. Shabbat, no. Mr. King? Mr. King. Mr. Kaufman? No. Mr. Kaufman, no. Mr. Lukemeyer? No. Mr. Lukemeyer, no. Mr. Mulvaney? No. Mr. Mulvaney, no. Mr. Tipton? No. Mr. Tipton, no. Ms. Herrera-Butler? No. Ms. Herrera-Butler, no. Mr. Hanna? No. Mr. Hanna, no. Mr. Huelskamp? No. Mr. Huelskamp, no. Mr. Schweikert? Mr. Schweikert, no. Mr. Bentivolio? No. Mr. Bentivolio, no. Mr. Collins? No. Mr. Collins, no. Mr. Rice? Mr. Rice, no. Ms. Velasquez? Aye. Ms. Velasquez, aye. Mr. Schrader? Aye. Mr. Schrader, aye. Ms. Clark? Aye. Ms. Clark, aye. Ms. Chu? Aye. Ms. Chu, aye. Ms. Hahn? Aye. Ms. Hahn, aye. Mr. Payne? Mr. Payne. Miss Meng. Miss Meng, aye. Mr. Schneider. Mr. Schneider. Mr. Barber. Aye. Mr. Barber, aye. Miss Custer. Aye. Miss Custer, aye. Mr. Murphy. Aye. Mr. Murphy, aye. Mr. Payne. Aye. Mr. Payne, aye.
Are there any other members who wish to vote? Seeing none, please report the vote.
The ayes are 10, the nays are 13.
On this vote, the ayes are 10 and the noes are 13. The amendment is not agreed to. Are there any other amendments? Seeing none, the question is on agreeing to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 2882 as amended. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. In the opinion of the chairs, the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. The amendment in the nature of a substitute is agreed to. And without objection, a quorum being present, H.R. 2882 as amended is favorably reported to the House. And without objection, the committee staff is authorized to correct punctuation and to make other necessary technical corrections and conforming changes. Our next bill for consideration is H.R. 776, the Security and Bonding Act of 2013, introduced by Mr. Hanna, Ms. Meng, and myself. And I yield to Mr. Hanna to speak on H.R. 776.
Thank you, Chairman Graves. And I'd like to thank Ranking Member Meng for her support, Congressman Lukemeyer, and Congressman Collins. This bill has to do with the Miller Act, which requires prime contractors to provide the government with a surety bond when bidding construction projects. The overall purpose of the surety bond is to protect the taxpayer, contractors, whoever the agency may be in charge, and ultimately the owner. What has happened in the past is that the assets behind some of these surety bonds, which ultimately back up the bond itself, have been specious assets and have not been claimable in any format that we would recognize. This tightens that up, requires certain assets that are liquid and discernible and attachable. I'm happy to answer any questions about it, but there has been these bonds have been a net increase to the Treasury. There is a surplus in there now, and it is a very simple fix to a problem that could be turned into a very large problem. It also expands the program to allow for more small businesses to use these bonds.
for a statement on H.R. 776. The committee now moves to consideration of H.R. 776. Clerk, please report the title of the bill.
H.R. 776 to amend Title 31 United States Code to revise requirements related to assets pledged by a surety and for other purposes.
Without objection, H.R. 776 is considered read and open for amendment at any point. I have an amendment in the nature of a substitute. Clerk, please read the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 776 offered by Mr. Graves of Missouri. Strike all that follows.
The amendment considered read. Without objection, the amendment in the nature of a substitute shall be considered as the base text for the purpose of amendment. Surety bonds protect taxpayers and contractors alike, and they ensure that the government is not left with unfinished buildings that subcontractors, and to make sure that subcontractors are paid in the process. H.R. 776, as introduced, strengthens those protections. However, much of 776 falls within the jurisdiction of the Judiciary Committee, which has not waived jurisdiction on this bill. Therefore, my amendment in the nature of a substitute ensures that we will not consider anything or any language that's out of our jurisdiction, only the language that is within our jurisdiction. I believe the bill as a whole and in part deserves our support. The portions of H.R. 776 in this committee's jurisdiction is going to allow more small construction companies to compete for federal contracts, and in turn are going to bring down the prices, I think, at least on federal construction projects. Based on data provided by the SBA, I'm convinced that we can accomplish this without putting taxpayers at risk, and therefore I'd urge support of the bill, and I now recognize Ms. Velasquez for her remarks.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We often discuss the SBA role in helping small firms access capital by guaranteeing private loans. Less attention has been paid to the SBA Surety Bond Initiative, which performs a parallel function in the area of bonding contractors. Current law requires that any contractor doing construction or repair work in excess of $150,000 must have a performance bond, essentially guaranteeing work will be completed in accordance with the contract's terms. In fiscal year 2013, the SBA's Surety Bond Program guaranteed 6,151 bonds and final bids. Absent this backstop, it is likely that many small firms will struggle to find private market companies willing to guarantee their work. Recent analyses have suggested that women-owned and minority-owned firms face greater challenges in finding private market surety companies to bond them. As a result, this initiative is particularly useful for many companies Congress has targeted for greater involvement in the federal marketplace. With this in mind, as we seek ways to foster small business participation in the federal marketplace, the SBA Surety Bond Program will likely need to be part of that equation. With projects growing in complexity, scope, and scale, it only makes sense that bonds providers will seek larger guarantees for their exposure. This committee and the House have previously recognized the economic value in the SBA Surety Bond Program. As part of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, we increased the program size limit to encourage smaller firms to take on larger projects. It is my hope the committee continues working together to find ways to maximize the value of this initiative. I thank the chairman for this legislation, and I yield back, and I support it.
Does any other member have an amendment to offer? Seeing none, the question is on agreeing to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 776. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. In the opinion of the chairs, the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. The amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 776 is agreed to. Without objection, the committee staff is authorized to correct punctuation and make other necessary technical corrections and conforming changes. Our next bill for consideration is H.R. 4121, the Small Business Development Centers Improvement Act of 2014, which is introduced by Ranking Member Velasquez. I now yield to Nini to speak on 4121.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In every state, the SBA's network of 900 small business development centers help would-be entrepreneurs build and launch new enterprises. They also assist existing business owners who are seeking to expand and grow their operations. whether it is how to construct a business plan, market research, manufacturing assistance, or guidance for firms seeking to begin exporting their goods abroad, SBDCs are absolutely vital to small company success. H.R. 4121, the Small Business Development Centers Improvement Act, gives SBDCs the tools and resources they need to continue to provide these invaluable services to our nation's entrepreneurs. During this period of fiscal restraint, it is important that we continue to look to proven programs like the SBDCs. Doing so allows us to more efficiently allocate federal resources to those programs that have proven benefits. SBDCs have a strong track record of success. In fact, previous analysis had found that for every dollar invested in them, $2.87 is returned to the Treasury. It is rare to see such a strong return on investment in any governmental program. That documented financial return does not even include the very extensive job creation and local economic development benefits SBDCs bring to their communities. At the same time that the SBDC program has demonstrated such success, SBA has recently experimented with a series of unproven programs that have neither been approved by the committee, by Congress, nor adhere to the same performance metrics as SBDC or other existing SBA entrepreneurial development initiatives. Given that SBA and the rest of the federal government is operating under significant budgetary pressure, we must ensure the agency's resources are used wisely. It is with this in mind that I am putting forward H.R. 4121. It will ensure that any new entrepreneurial development services will be offered through the agency's existing networks. With budgets tight and sequestration still in effect, we simply cannot afford pie-in-the-sky experimentation and duplication in the SBA programs. The SBA existing entrepreneurial development networks, including not just SBDC, but also women business centers and SCORE as well, are well positioned to channel any new assistance to business owners. Using these existing networks, rather than creating new duplicative ones, will ensure that the entrepreneurs receive the resources they need without wasting taxpayers' dollars on unproven schemes. We must also work to ensure that the SBDCs are freed up to do what they do best, assist small business owners. In that regard, the legislation makes a number of important changes that will streamline their operations and reduce their administrative burden. By granting SBDCs authority to better market their services, the bill will expand outreach to small firms that may not be aware these services exist. In addition, the legislation ensures that SBDC grants are targeted to the non-for-profit and higher education institutions that have proven to be such valuable partners in the SBDC program today. Mr. Chairman, every economic downturn our nation sees a spike in entrepreneurship. As more Americans turn to entrepreneurship to support their families, we must ensure the assets are in place to help them succeed. The legislation I'm presenting will improve the SBDC program and help new entrepreneurs and existing businesses flourish and create new jobs. I urge my colleagues to vote yes, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. Are there any other members who wish to be recognized for a statement on H.R. 4121? Seeing none, I support the ranking member's bill for all the reasons that she provided. Repeatedly, this committee has expressed concerns regarding SBA's creation of new and unauthorized entrepreneurial programs in this already overcrowded space, and this bill reflects the committee's views and estimates of the last 3 years. Both the ranking member Velasquez and I have repeatedly stressed the need for SBA to strengthen authorized programs such as SBDCs rather than creating initiatives that duplicate or overlap existing programs. So with that, the committee now moves to consideration of H.R. 4121. Clerk, please report the title of the bill.
H.R. 4121, to amend the Small Business Act to provide for improvements to small business development centers.
Without objection, H.R. 4121 is considered read and open for amendment at any point. Now with that,
Mr. Chair,
Murphy, you have an amendment?
I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk, please report the amendment.
Amendment number 1 to H.R. 4121, offered by Mr. Murphy of Florida.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read. Gentlemen, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I offer a common sense amendment to help small businesses get back on their feet in the wake of natural disasters. Currently, small business development centers are required by law to assist only small businesses in the same state as them. This makes sense most of the time, but not in the aftermath of natural disasters like Hurricanes Sandy and Katrina. More often than not, SBDCs in areas hit by natural disasters are in no position to assist their community because they themselves are in the midst of recovering. My amendment would allow unaffected SBDCs to assist small businesses in areas where the President has declared a natural disaster. I'm sure you'll all agree that this is a straightforward fix to a needless problem. I ask my colleagues to support this amendment as well as the bipartisan bicameral Small Business Disaster Reform Act, where I first introduced this provision and which has the support of multiple members of this committee. I yield the balance of my time.
Does any other member wish to be heard on the amendment?
Mr. Chairman, I strongly support the gentleman's amendment. I myself have seen the work the SBDCs have done right after 9/11 and right after Sandy, and it is worth having the opportunity to be able to allow for personnel from New York's SBDCs to go to Florida. They have the experience, they have the expertise. They will help small businesses navigate the bureaucratic processes of the disaster with FEMA and SBA. So it is a good amendment, and I'm very proud to support it.
Any other members wish to be heard on the amendment? With that, I think the amendment makes all the sense in the world. I wish that members of Congress could do the same thing that we're trying to allow the SBDCs to do in times of emergency. I don't know if you know it, but members of Congress can't use their office personnel or their funds to be able to help out another member of Congress if they've been lost their office in a natural disaster. So it's this makes all the sense in the world. So with that, the question is on amendment number 1 offered by Mr. Murphy. All those in favor to 4121, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The opinion of the chair is the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. The amendment is agreed to. Mr. Payne.
I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk, please report the amendment.
Amendment number 2 to H.R. 4121, offered by Mr. Payne of New Jersey. Add, at the end of the bill, the following. Section 1, inclusions of
Without objection, the
entrepreneurship.
amendment is considered read. And with that, gentlemen, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Prior to getting into the amendment, I have been listening to the discussion this afternoon, and I feel that my colleagues offered some very good amendments around women and minorities, because historically they've been disadvantaged in those areas. I used to work for my uncle at one time in a printing company, and we went through the GSA process, and the business grew, and we flourished. And when we got into the private sector, the larger printing companies colluded to have the paper companies not sell this one company, the only minority firm in that industry, not to sell us paper. We had to go to our senator at that time in New Jersey and compel the paper companies to start selling us the raw material again. So the amendments that were offered by my colleagues earlier to strengthen the focus on women and minorities are not about equality, but equity. The problem with equality is, in this sense, is that it addresses all groups without regard of the historical privilege that one group has had and continues to have. Equity, on the other hand, acknowledges the unfair treatment that has disadvantaged certain groups and attempts to level the playing field. Even with the proposed increases in contracting goals for women and minorities, we would not even begin to see the equity. I hope my colleagues can begin to understand equality versus equity as we move forward. And my amendment addresses the unemployed, another group facing tough times. The amendment looks at the current unemployment rate at 6.6%, but For every one job available, there are 3 people actively searching for employment. Since 1995, small businesses have generated over 65% of the net new jobs, and over 50% of the working population is employed by small business. As we look to strengthen SBDCs and expand support for entrepreneurs through Ranking Member Velasquez's bill, we should also look to expand the pathway to entrepreneurship specifically for the unemployed. My amendment adds entrepreneurial education and support for the unemployed individuals to list the services provided by small business development centers. Entrepreneurship is one of the most viable career and economic growth opportunities. And as we shore up our efforts to support entrepreneurs, we must include the unemployed as well. And I hope this is one subgroup that we can understand we need to support. So I urge my colleagues to support this amendment.
Do any other members wish to be heard on the amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to wholeheartedly support Congressman Payne's amendment and thank him for his work to spur entrepreneurship in our communities. And I also want to say how much I appreciate his preliminary comments and what he had to say about equity. We had an opportunity several times today to bring equity to groups in our country have been disadvantaged, and we failed to do so. I hope we can reconsider and do a better job in the future, but I certainly want to commend the Congressman for making that very clear to all of us. As a former small business owner, my wife and I ran a small business in our community for 22 years. We know, as Congressman Payne pointed out, that small businesses are our best job creators. And I believe that's why we must do more to ensure that potential entrepreneurs, people who are currently unemployed would be in that group, have the tools and the knowledge they need to succeed. So I encourage all of my colleagues on the Small Business Committee to support this amendment. I believe it's the right thing to do, and hopefully we will all agree and vote yea on this amendment. Thank you. I yield back.
Any other members wish to be heard on the amendment? Seeing none, just to clarify real quick, the amendment continues to promote entrepreneurship as an option for the unemployed, and it does so by just using already existing resources that the SBDCs have, and with that I do support it. The question is on the amendment offered by Mr. Payne, amendment number 2 to H.R. 4121. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. In the opinion of the chairs, the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. The amendment is agreed to. Does any other member wish to seek recognition with an amendment? Seeing none, the question is on agreeing to H.R. 4121 as amended. All those in favor say aye. All opposed, no. In the opinion of the chairs, the ayes have it, and H.R. 4121 is agreed to. And without objection, a quorum being present, the bill is favorably reported to the House, and without objection, the committee staff is authorized to correct punctuation and make other necessary technical changes and conforming changes. With that, the last bill that we have is H.R. 2452, the Women's Procurement Program Equalization Act of 2014, introduced by Ranking Member Velasquez. I now yield to
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Despite the increased presence of women-owned business in our economy, the federal government has continually failed to meet its 5% procurement goal for women-owned small businesses. Data for FY 2013 indicates that only 4.33% of eligible federal contracting dollars were awarded to these businesses. Failure to meet this goal deprived women-owned businesses of over $2 billion in contracting dollars. Through the Women's Procurement Program, women-owned small businesses are eligible for contracts in 83 industries that have historically had underutilization of women-owned businesses. However, since its inception, the program has faced obstacles as it took over a decade to adopt rules that will put the program into effect. While its implementation was great progress, it by no means fixed the inequity that exists as the Women's Procurement Program continues to lag behind. Simply put, contracting officers lack the options under this program that exist under other programs. To address these issues, H.R. 2452 The Women's Procurement Program Equalization Act of 2013 seeks to give federal agencies the tools to award more contracts to women-owned businesses. Let me be clear. The bill does not create new tools solely for women-owned businesses, but rather allows contracting officers to use the tools that are currently available under existing programs such as the Hub Zone and 8A initiatives. The main issue here is about parity. The disparity in the tools available to contracting officers to award contracts to women-owned businesses has limited the effectiveness of the program. In the last fiscal year, there were only 807 contracting actions worth $40 million awarded through the Women's Procurement Program. This amounts to only 0.0004% of dollars awarded to small businesses and only 0.0001% of eligible contracting dollars. The program has also been hindered by flaws in its certification process. Existing law has asked businesses to certify their eligibility for the program and then be verified by the agency or third parties, with agency procurement officers acting as the certifiers. The certification process has become bogged down. These officials should be focused on awarding contracts to women-owned small businesses, not spending resources on an extensive certification process. To address this issue, the legislation puts SBA in charge of certifying participants. If unable to do so, the SBA may continue to approve third-party certifiers to carry out such responsibilities. Until we can ensure a uniform certification process, female business owners will never reap the full benefits of the Women's Procurement Program. We continually hear that what small businesses need most in this economy are customers. Well, our own federal government continues to be the largest customer that a small business can have. Yet, the federal marketplace remains largely untapped by women-owned businesses. Additionally, by ensuring that these businesses receive their fair share of contracting dollars, we could further increase job creation. If the 5% goal was met, women-owned businesses could create over 673,000 new jobs. Strengthening this initiative is critical to the almost 8 million women-owned businesses in the United States, making up nearly 30% of all businesses across the country and generating $1.2 trillion in revenue. They are a rapidly growing part of our national economic fabric. Ensuring that they have access to government contracts is essential for their continued growth, and that is exactly what this bill will do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and yield back.
Any other members wish to be recognized for statement on 2452?
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last word.
Go ahead.
I want to thank Ranking Member Velasquez for introducing this important legislation, and I'm proud to co-sponsor the bill, which provides additional support to women business owners in their efforts to make contracts or have contracts with the federal government. We can and must do better. We have a goal for women-owned businesses under the law, which we're not meeting. And we have to do better to bring women-owned businesses into contracts with federal agencies. Women-owned businesses are a critical part of the economy in my Southern Arizona district and, of course, nationwide. And the steps we take to help these small businesses will boost the overall economy as we continue working to improve the jobs market. This bill gives procurement personnel the authority they need to expand the number of women-owned businesses being awarded contracts and allows the SBA to meet the goal of 5%. I encourage my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support and vote for this important bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Any other members wish to be recognized on H.R. 2452? Seeing none, I do support 2452. I think the legislation does bring some parity among the SBA's contracting programs, and that's something that this committee has long supported. So the committee now moves to consideration of H.R. 2452. Clerk, please report the title.
H.R. 2452 to amend the Small Business Act with respect to procurement program for women-owned small business concerns and for other purposes.
Without objection, H.R. 2452 is considered read and open for amendment at any point. Does anyone wish to offer an amendment? Seeing none, the question is on agreeing to H.R. 2452. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. In the opinion of the chairs, the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. H.R. 2452 is agreed to. Without objection, quorum being present, the bill is favorably reported to the House. And without objection, again, the committee staff is authorized to correct punctuation and make other necessary technical changes and conforming changes. And with that, I thank everybody for coming back, and the hearing is adjourned.